It's Norm from Testin.
And Kate from Testin.
And welcome back to a new model behavior series. We are going to be assembling awesome model kit.
Yep.
Today, maybe it'll take more than a day. Probably will take more than a day. We wanted to get back into the groove of model making with one of our favorite types of model kits, some Bandai Snap Fit Kit. Bandai's put out some really amazing kits under their Star Wars license.
Yep.
We've put together, tiny X-Wings, TIE fighters in the past. They have a great and they also have that incredible Millennium Falcon.
Oh yeah.
That 1/44th scale one. That one, yeah.
The Holy Grail.
Yes. So much detail. The amount of detail they can get in their injection molding is just staggering. And just released recently this fall is Star Destroyer. Let's put the lid up.
Oh, yeah.
And so this is a 1/5000th scale Star Destroyer because Star Destroyers are quite big. Like, I think if the Falcon was this big, Star Destroyer would be that big. You're not going to get a 1/44th scale. But this kit I'm very excited for because not only is it a Star Destroyer that's going to be good size, but also has built-in lighting.
Yes, I was very impressed to see the lighting that comes with this.
So there are a couple of things that we want to do. Of course, we're going to be putting it together, but we're going to kind of do a couple of things our own way. We're going to be painting it.
Yes.
It does come in a nice gray, and if you wanted to use this just as a base color, that's totally fine.
Totally fine.
But there are also panel lines here.
Yeah, and you can almost not even make them out in its current form because they're so fine, and because like the one color of gray is really just blending them all together. So I think we're gonna try and bring those out a little.
Totally. We want to accentuate those lines. They are, I think, a little more shallow than the lines you'd find on a Gundam.
Yeah.
Partly because of the scale. Like, it wouldn't make sense for the trenches to be wide or deep when we're talking about something that's supposed to be so big. But they're there, and we're going to have strategies to accentuate those. We're going to paint them as well. Do some what's called Aztec Ink on this. That's the hope. Have you seen Aztec Ink on Starship models before?
I have. I've actually worked with some Aztec Ink stencils for like an Enterprise for Star Trek. So I have some experience with this.
Yes, there are a lot of different ways to do it. You've done it with vinyl cutting before. You can do it by creating stencils or masking. We're going to do it in a way that hopefully out there you can emulate with very cheap supplies. And then we're also going to be toying with the lighting a little bit.
Yeah.
The lighting is an included pack-in. Let me see if I can find the pieces. Yeah, so this little box here has, fits the batteries. It actually comes with like these interesting plugs that then split off to all these bulbs. I believe they are LED.
Yeah.
We're not doing fiber optics.
No.
It is an option, fiber optics. Like you did fiber optics for Adam's.
For the blimp.
The blimp, and that was a very involved process.
It was. That also involved a color wheel, though, for color changing. So I think that if it were something that was just straight fiber optics, it'd be a little more manageable. But I think we're going to run into some scale issues if we tried to do that here.
Yeah, you'd be drilling holes, and there are holes here, but wiring, it's almost like making a nervous system inside a miniature, and there's not going to be a lot of space in the cavity of this. So we're going to stick with their lighting system, but also try to apply some techniques to avoid light bleed and maybe do a little bit of tinting.
Yeah, kick it up a notch.
Yes. So a lot to do. Typically, I would just take this out, put out the parts, snip them, and start putting it together.
Right.
What do you think our strategy should be?
I'm thinking that since we want to add the Aztec Ink and we want to change the base color as a whole, that we're going to first do our Aztec Ink darker paint pass, then put on the masks to cover that up, and then repaint everything, possibly while still on the sprues.
Which is a lot simpler than cutting out the pieces and then putting them in individual, taping them on a table or something. That could make it very handy, very smart. Well, let's open the packages and show you some of the fine details of the model kit and then plan out our masking. Kate, there aren't a ton of sprues here compared to some of the other kits we put together, but the detail is incredible.
It's really incredible. It's so tiny and precise, and the holes for the lights are so small.
So take a closer look here. Like, this is the superstructure, and you can tell they're pre-drilled holes, which maybe you can see, yeah, pop out in front. And in the back, oh, this is cool. They've designed in little recesses for all the holes. If you have fiber. I don't know exactly what the width of that is, but I think it's wide enough at least to get the fiber in there, which makes sense, right? Because you want the bigger hole to plug that in. We're not going to be doing fiber, but it's an option. I'm not as familiar with all the filming models for the Star Destroyer. I know we're a bunch, but I gotta trust, like, this is just so many details. I think I've read in the forums people are very impressed by the amount of detail Bandai has put in. They've even kind of done the research for the donor parts from some of the model kits that the original model makers used to put these together. But that's just super, super impressive. Also interesting is this.
The clear parts.
They're clear parts, and originally, when I looked this up, I thought the clear parts were going to be hiding behind.
Right.
Right. In some of the model kits we put together, they're kind of like, they worked as really thick diffusers, like light piping. But this is not that. This is just a duplicate. Like this and this is they're exactly the same, minus the part for the stand here. And I guess the idea is that you could make it with the clear part, but paint it up the same.
Right.
But you would get a different light quality.
Right. I think that there's some thinking that it might help focus some of the light to come out of those holes that are drilled into it.
I've never done that before, and it does still have the holes already pre-drilled in. So I think might be worth doing, because the clear parts and the lighting kit are a premium model.
Yeah.
It's much cheaper if you get it without that. Let's try using the clear parts and do an A/B test. Let's paint them black, then paint them gray, stick some lights behind them, and see which one we like more.
Yeah, do a comparison,
And you are right. Keeping things on the spruce is going to make things super easy.
Yeah.
We have our paint. Let's talk about what we're going to use.
Yeah.
So we got some Tamiya's here. Now, when we started this, we're looking at what's the color of a Star Destroyer?
I know. I always lean more gray, but everything that I've seen in research tends to lean more white.
Yes, right. More white. I think Lego gray also, right? Lego gray, that starts, but I think lighter is going to be better, especially since we have the opportunity to darken up a little bit.
Right. So we've got a slightly darker gray, or we'll have the white for the base, but we'll have a very light gray to do our Aztec-ing with.
And we want that in gray, so to reverse engineer it, the gray will go on first, is that correct?
Yes.
And this is a very fine primer, which works as that gray. We'll do our Aztec-ing, and then the white will go on top of that. So first step, I guess, is to get everything in this gray, and for the clear parts, get in black.
Yeah. It looks the same.
It's essentially the same.
It's the same color.
And that's the darker one?
Yeah.
Our first coat of paint has dried, and as you were putting it on, Kate, we're like, well, this looks really close to the base color.
While it was wet, it was almost indistinguishable, but I think as it dried, you could see a little bit more of a difference.
And it's something that may be even difficult to see out there, but here's an example where you put that darker, slightly darker, the primer light gray on this panel here, but did not put it on these panels.
Correct.
And that's where we could see, yes, there's a little bit of a difference. The other thing is that our actual final coat will be lighter than the plastic. It's going to be this insignia white. So there will be a little more contrast there. Now you ask, why didn't we put the light gray on everything? And that's because light gray is only going to be the Aztec-ing.
Right.
Which is only on the big panels, that panel, and then the top and bottom of the ship. We also use this as an opportunity to test the clear parts, so let's talk about that.
Yeah, so these were all clear parts. I started by just trying to do like a dark gray, and the coating was not happening very well, so I switched to a primer. I tested out both the light gray primer and a regular non-Tamiya rattle can flat black primer. Now, while
let's show the light gray.
Yeah.
Because we have our lighting system here. These are the actual lights we're going to use. And one of these LEDs pop behind here. It's not very good.
Yeah, so the reason we like the Tamiya for these kits is because it's so thin and it doesn't fill in our panel lines, but that means you don't get the best like opacity coverage. So we switched to the black, which I think works a lot better, obviously, but you will notice that because it's not the super thin stuff, you are losing a bit of your detail. You can see that extra mass on top of everything.
Yeah, it almost looks like a recast of it, right? A chunkier casting. And then that wouldn't even be the final coat, because on top of that, we'd still need to put layers of Tamiya on top of that. So while the clear parts definitely have some benefit if you want to really lock in that light and use the clear parts to do a little bit of an even diffusion, you're going to need to spend a lot more time with it. And that's just not time we have today for the purpose of this project. So we're going to go with the standard piece, and that's this piece. And if we shine a light behind that, you can see that it's pretty opaque, and you're still going to see a little bit of that light pass through. Okay, so our next step is the Aztec Ink. And what's our strategy for that?
Now, we laid down our slightly darker gray, and the idea is that the Aztec Ink pattern will be in that color. So right now, we're going to cut out some bits of masking tape, lay them down in the pattern that we like, and then with those in place, we'll spray on our lighter insignia white, and when you peel off the little bits of masking, you'll have those darker pieces showing through.
And if you have a question of what is Aztec Ink, I'm not exactly sure where the name comes from, but if you look at photos, you can Google it right now of like the Starship Enterprise on the saucer section. While it may read on the TV screen like a gray, there is an unevenness to it. It is broken up, and not just broken up by panel lines here, but actually broken up by these irregular shapes, which on the saucer section of the Enterprise has angles to them, so it kind of looks like these glyphs that you might find. So that might be where the phrase Aztec Ink comes from.
I did always assume that it was because it reminded me of some Aztec designs. You can notice those similar shapes, so I always assumed that's where the name came from.
Yeah, and then on the Star Wars side, on a Star Destroyer, actually this is a good example. This is a photo of, I believe, the filming miniature. If not, it's their reproduction of it. And you can see, it's almost tough to see, on the bottom, there are these irregular shapes. They're not exactly rectangles or squares. They're almost these weird Tetris pieces.
Yeah, I was just going to say they're like Tetris blocks.
And they are all over, very tiny. And what's also interesting is that they don't necessarily fall within the confines of the panel lines. We've seen model makers do that, where they mask off and they want, for example, on the panel line here, this irregular shape will be a darker shade of gray or a lighter shade of gray. But we've also seen people do the masking where it kind of stacks on top of the panel lines. I think we're gonna go that way.
Yeah, I liked the look of it. And so we're gonna stick with some shapes that are similar to what you see in the panel sizes and shape layout, but we're just gonna place them wherever we want to, have some overlap happening there.
And of course, because we're experimenting with this, let's do a test. I think we could do a test on perhaps this piece. What I've done is I got some masking tape, laid it out, just kind of cut using a straight edge into these tiny rectangular pieces. So we want to go real tiny because this is 1/5000. We're going to lay this on here, kind of creatively go free form and build our regular shapes. Then we're going to put a little bit of coat of the final color and see how that looks.
Yeah. Now, you had a really good idea. Instead of cutting out a shape and trying to maybe put that L bracket shape into it, why not take two rectangle pieces and put them at an angle to create the shape afterwards?
Just overlap them.
Yeah, less cutting, much easier to just kind of go with it as it comes.
So for example, I'll do a sample on this cutting mat, like a line here, and then I can just literally stack that on there, and that's some type of L shape. If I want to go a little fancier, I can just grab another piece.
Exactly.
And that's an irregular shape right there. Okay, our test piece is done. As you were laying the little masking strips, how did you feel about that strategy?
I loved it. It was actually great because it's sort of like getting to make it up on the fly as you go instead of predetermining all of these different shapes. It was like, ooh, well, this spot here, I'm going to put a little bit bigger one. Ooh, let's have a tail on it. Like, it was nice.
And you're looking for that kind of unevenness, the almost pixelated look. Right?
Yes.
You're adding these hard edges. I love parts where there are natural angled parts, and you just have like an angle with a square.
Right.
And that's cool.
I think that it also helps create other shapes. So like here I put a big rectangle, but I put it against an angle, and that creates some triangle shapes next to it. So
Yeah.
neat.
Something I noticed is that you did not put the masking on a lot of the raised surfaces.
Yeah. I started looking for any flat spots, and it came from an instinct of like, oh, well, it's not going to want to stick totally flat against something bigger. But then it just turned out to be, I think that that's going to help because one of the reasonings for doing Aztec Ink is to break it up. Now, if you already have a raised surface, that's breaking it up already.
Yes.
So let's stick to the flat spots that need a little extra.
And that final color, the insignia white, is on there. And while, it does all kind of read as very similar shades of light gray, it is different. It has a little bit of a warmer, I think, tone quality to it on the insignia white than just the cast plastic color. And plus, even if it was the same, adding that tiny coat of paint, I think, does something for the model.
Yeah, I think that it adds a really nice texture and finish to it that makes you go, oh, that wasn't just an injection molded piece that came right out of the machine and now it's on my shelf.
Yes. Okay, so we're gonna get some demasking, demasking gratification early on. It's relatively easy to spot where the masking is, but also a good tip is...
Yes, something I like to do is as soon as I finish masking a piece, I pull out my phone and I take a photo. That way, just in case our paint blends it really, really well, and I'm like, oh yeah, I think I got it all, but later you realize that there's a secret little piece of masking hiding in there. This allows you to double check and go, yep, I counted all the same, we've got them all up, good to go.
Okay, so let's take off that masking. Oh, I like this already.
Yeah, it looks great.
That looks awesome, Kate.
I love it.
Oh, wow. As we were saying off camera, the two grays. Well, side by side, even when you saw that first coat go on, then you can tell they're different, but it's like, are they really that different?
It's like minimally different. You can't really tell, but once they're right on top of each other, there's no mistaking that.
That is so cool. And I think the other thing we're experimenting with was the size of the Aztec.
Yeah.
Like how wide to make these strips of masking tape. I think this is pretty much right on.
Yeah.
We're using the panel lines and kind of natural panel as like the guide for it. So our next step is going to be taking what we did with this and then applying it to the tops and bottoms of the Star Destroyer. How about you take one side and I'll take another side, and we'll cut up a bunch more masking strips and get to work. So we've been doing this for about half an hour or so. And while we were applying our masking, I turned to Kate and I said, you know what? The top and the bottoms may look very different because we usually have our own style of how we're applying this tape. So I asked if you thought it'd be a good idea for maybe us to swap pieces.
Which I think sounds fantastic.
Yeah, so let's do a little bit of a check-in and take a look and talk about our approaches. And then we'll work on each other's pieces to kind of balance all out. So this is, first of all, is so relaxing.
I love it. It's very meditative. You can zone out and just start placing things very calmly. It's not messy. It's, it's not noisy. It's just relaxing.
And I think it's all about just finding, trying to make something look random is so tough for us as human beings. So you're actually working extra hard as the process goes on to not have it be too symmetrical, but then not have it be too asymmetrical. Building random shapes, having a lot of fun just stacking the pieces together to create these oblongy Tetris shapes.
Yeah.
Using some of the panel lines as maybe some guides
Yeah.
as like that's one edge I want to stick to, and I'm trying to go small.
Yeah.
And I do love your those shapes you have here, like, go right in those panel lines. That's so good.
I had a lot of fun, although I noticed you have a lot of more triangular shapes, and I
Yeah.
like that, and I think that's something I'm missing. I was gonna say, I'll start doing that, but since we're switching, you start doing that on this one, and I'll do some more straight lines on those.
Absolutely. So about half an hour here, what we'll do is another 15, 20 minutes on each of those pieces so it doesn't look too cluttered.
Yeah.
And then we'll put that top coat on here and we'll get to some fun demasking. 20 minutes later again, one Band-Aid later, a little minor accident. We're done with our Aztec masking.
We are.
Let's do a little bit of side-by-side.
I think it was a really good idea to have a swap halfway through because you do start to notice you fall into a certain pattern, you start to use certain shapes.
Yeah.
So stopping, swapping gives a more uniform, random look.
And the thing that we're not so sure of is if this density is going to look good.
Yeah.
Right? I think a lot of that's going to be the balance between the two shades of gray. My gut says higher density is always preferred, but don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of a gamble here. One of the things that is nice to remember is, say this was black underneath. Everywhere where the blue is black underneath. That would be much more in your face. Everything is noticeable. But when it's going to be two tones that are really so close together, I think you can get away with a higher density and it won't be as glaringly obvious.
Yes, and the other thing that's going to be cool is that the two tones, as light shines on them, maybe it'll shine light. Light will reflect off them a little bit differently too. So we're going to put our insignia white on these pieces, let that dry, and then we can get, I think, started on some assembly.
Yeah.
Once again, the insignia white is on everything, and it looks so good.
It does. I'm really happy with it.
Yeah, I'm so glad we didn't stick with that plastic color.
Yeah.
Even though the grays were very similar, it does bring something to it, a little bit of a warmer tone too, which I think makes some sense. If you look at the photos of the Star Destroyer models that have been in stores, have yellowed a little bit, so I think that works. So we're gonna go demask. It's gonna be very satisfying, I promise. And Kate, you've printed out, actually, the photos that you took.
Yeah, these are just snapped a photo with my cell phone, sent it to AirPrint, got these out. That way, I'm going to follow this reference down as I go, and I'm going to check them off so that I can know, all right, got that one, because it'll be really easy with all of the similar shapes on there to just miss one.
I'm going to not do that just to demonstrate what happens with overconfidence of like, oh, I can see the contrast between the paint and the masking and see if I miss any. The right way to do it is the way Kate's doing it, but let's do a little bit of A/B comparison just to see. All right, so we got our little X-Actos. Should be easy to just pick and pry.
Yep.
And let's see what it looks like. Demasking is done. Also, very satisfying process.
Extremely satisfying.
And it looks so good.
I'm very happy with it.
Oh.
Now, I will say, you might be right. I think we could have gone a little denser.
And that's the tough thing, because like we said before, when you have the high contrast blue masking tape on there, it looks like it's too much.
It
looks
does.
speckly, but when it's low contrast, I agree. I feel like there could be bigger ones. Something I was realizing as I was putting on the masking is scale matters so much. And we're using the panel lines as a guide. and realizing for something like the Star Destroyer near the back, when there's so much surface area, I could probably gone bigger there. Like bigger masking there, and then kind of tightened it up as it got to the front. But still, I think the two colors we chose.
I think it works perfectly.
Right? And of course, you putting out the photo reference was great. It turned out I didn't miss any, but it's still in the future. Do what Kate did. Use your photo reference. It is a great tip to do. Next up, we're going to be doing assembling.
Yep.
There's going to be wiring the lighting, and then the big task is going to be accentuating the panel lines.
A little bit of weathering to bring out those lines.
Now, that's going to be a whole other day, but this wraps up part 1 of the Star Destroyer Bandai kit build. I hope you have fun. If you have examples of Aztec Ink that you've done for projects or models of Aztec Ink that you've liked, please share in the comments below. And I think we'll definitely be doing more of this in future model making projects.
Small investment, big payoff.
Absolutely, and you just kind of zone out into it. Hope you enjoyed this. We'll be back tomorrow with the rest of this build, but thanks for watching.